Brutalist VistaVision was like a cinematic event for a certain group of people. So yes.
Or Avengers Endgame.
Sure. But
this was truly the Avengers Endgame of Chinese slow cinema.
Yes, of course. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cannes Canon, where we look at the Cannes competition filmmakers' previous works to get a better understanding of them. And today we're going to look into the films of Bi Gan.
So Bi Gan is a maverick Chinese filmmaker who, shockingly, is the second youngest filmmaker in the competition, but as only 35 years old, has already cemented himself potentially as one of the new masters of the slow cinema movement. But when I say slow cinema, you're probably thinking of the movies of Abbas Kiarostami or Chantal Akerman, films that are very still, that have not a lot of movement, have a stationary camera, and just let life and its stillness pass by for a certain amount of time. However, Bi Gan works in a very different manner. His slow cinema is much closer to Andrei Tarkovsky or Bellatar or Theodoros Angelopoulos, whose films, although full of stillness, are marked by the movement of the camera, the movement of the characters, almost using movement to lull us into this meditative state. To talk a little bit about Bi Gan's origins, he began his career wanting to be a television director, looking at films and television shows in the mainstream and hoping to make stuff like that, until he was exposed to Andrei Tarkovsky's film Stalker, which made him reimagine what his cinema could be. At the age of 25, he made his first feature film, Kaili Blues, which is set in his hometown. And just a few years after Kaili Blues, he returned to make his sophomore feature, Long Day's Journey into Night, at the age of 27 years old. This is a filmmaker at the beginning of his career, just making now his third feature film.
Let's talk about Bi Gan as a filmmaker, and of course, the inevitable thing that we absolutely have to talk about is the long shots.
And the long takes, that is completely inseparable from who he is as a filmmaker and his identity. Kaili Blues, it's a 41-minute long take. Long Day's Journey into Night, 55 minutes and in 3D.
I've gone to a certain age. I've gone past, the initial wow factor of oh, filmmakers can do these massive long takes. They can even stitch them together and make it so that the whole film is a single take. Whoa, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a cool gimmick, but you kind of get to a point where you're
like... It's a cool gimmick, and sometimes it feels not as purposeful as it should be, and it feels more like a selling point than an aesthetic proposition. From what I've seen of Bi Gan, I feel like the long takes are purposeful to his form and add something to his form. And they feel genuinely not just impressive, but they do give me a feeling I felt was kind of new, actually. A new way of doing a long take that inspires different emotions.
I would say that the reason why you're feeling something new, something different, is because the intent with these long takes is absolutely not to shock the audience or go, wow, that's possible, that's amazing that they did that. Instead,
there are a few moments like this anyways, but
yes, but I think it's still very logical in how it fits into it, and it's not purely for the shock value of it. I mean, it leans into that because, especially in Long Day's Journey into Night, so much of the film is about the wonder of cinema and cinema as dreams manifested. I think more so, this is the logical conclusion of the slow cinema movement. As slow cinema filmmakers, if we are cutting as little as possible, well, now we have the technology we're not carrying massive magazines. Why don't we just keep filming? Why don't we just keep it rolling and just let life happen? And in that way, I think the proposition that Bi Gan is putting forward here is the way that we view the world through our eyes. There's no edits. We're not editing life in front of our eyes. And so it feels as though his camera is presenting us with that sort of life unedited feeling.
See, that's interesting that you say that, because I feel that way when I see a Christian Mungiu film. And I feel like he is incredibly strong at making these long takes that aren't distinctly showy, but that are incredibly richly composed and that work as these really long, oftentimes just stable shots over a certain duration that imitates the rhythm of life and that show you things uncut. The long takes in Bi Gan, I'm talking about the whole film, all of Long Day's Journey into Night, don't give me the feeling of watching the rhythm of life, because the way they're edited together have strange beginnings and strange ends. It depends on what half of the movie we're watching, but it gives me a different sense than seeing life untouched.
I would say to that, I think it's doing both. The first half, which represents reality, is cut, it's edited, it's sort of this very cinematic approach. Whereas the second half, which is this dream, he's in a movie theater, he's put on 3D glasses and he's fallen asleep. That is the part that almost feels more real than his own reality does.
If you see it that way, that's cool. I just really do not see it that way.
That's
like,
fair.
I think the first half, I do not get the sense of any naturalism of realism, nothing. Like, for me, the first half it's not even like slices of life, you know? And I don't feel like the scenes themselves are natural. Slow cinema is only good if it stays compelling cinema. And I think the way he utilizes these long takes is to inhabit a certain mindset, a bit of a complex melting pot of memories. And in the second half, you have something that is obviously dreamlike, but very much like a madhouse. The whole scene takes place at night. The setting feels like it was built like a video game level, where you kind of start in this introductory area,
and it feels,
you go to like a tutorial,
levels.
And then you get to the big zone. You have to go from area to area to find the clues and the objects. And you were saying, you know, when you hold on a shot, you get more of a glimpse of reality. But in the second half of Long Day's Journey into the Night, the longer we stayed on the shot, the more I was like, I'm not seeing something real. It's
not because I think that the second half feels like reality. It's because the first half is so fragmented. It's so dreamlike. It's this scattershot collection of memories, seeing this man come back to his hometown, and he's looking for this woman that he knew all these years ago, and we're intercutting his search for her with his memories of her. And at times it becomes very hard to follow. What is a memory? What is real? How does it blend together? And it's only when he actually falls asleep and we get into this long take and he's in a dream that we actually feel like we're getting some real example of who he is, how he sees the world. I think that's more what I mean, is that reality sort of comes more into focus, even though it is this very hallucinatory dream sequence with a floating camera and a child wearing a skull. There's all these things that are very clearly signifying we're in a dream, but it feels like his dream is more lucid than his reality. I think this is the type of film that can lull you to sleep, and that's part of the experience, that's part of the effect. I would actually say this film has a moment in it where the main character goes into a cinema and immediately falls asleep. It's almost like Bi Gan is intending for the audience to be lulled to sleep at some point.
It's very fragmented. You don't necessarily know where you are. Every time you think you know what's going on, he throws another scene at you for you to piece things together. So it's a bit of a different way of thinking about storytelling. It clearly plays on tropes and on ideas of the neo-noir. Through this prism of this genre, is like, let's see what we can do with these characters.
It is a tribute to Chinese cinema and Hong Kong cinema. I mean, it's impossible to look at that opening image of the woman in the green dress in the hotel room and there being smoke in the room and not think of Wong Kar-wai. There's so many references to cinema as a whole, and how cinema uses genre and how that represents and doesn't represent our real world. I think it's so fitting to have that moment midway through the film when he goes into the theater and everyone puts on their 3D glasses. It feels like the classic cheesy moment that they used to have in movies saying, now put on your 3D glasses.
And that's when the title pops up.
And that's when the title pops up, because it's almost like it's saying, okay, you've seen the prologue, now this is the movie.
You start to like make connections. The little things that reappear in certain ways. You know, you have the little boy that pops up and he talks about ping pong, and you remember, oh, there was a conversation about ping pong earlier, and he was talking about perhaps a future child. Is this his son? It's an incredibly fun exercise to play.
But again, that's why I feel like what I was saying before, that his reality, all these scenes we see at the beginning, are so foggy and so scattershot and strange, and they don't feel completely real. It's kind of hazy. But the thing that does actually feel real is the dream. That's the moment where all these things start to connect.
The dream that he's going through is almost like an alternative reality. It makes connections that might be faulty, that might not be true, but that feel real, and he might be waking up from the dream, having some sort of an epiphany.
Or possibly he has no epiphany whatsoever and he forgets it all. Very likely he just continues on with his day and he goes to see who he thinks might be the woman he's been looking for at this nightclub. And it's very possible that all of this climactic scene for us, the viewer, could really mean nothing to this guy.
Bi Gan was inspired to make the film based on the location.
Going from the mine sort of location to outside.
To start
and
in
then,
a mine, like as closed off as you can,
start
right?
in a mine and then float into the city. And then to go from there to another place where you have to float down to the next level. Amazing that they were able to pull something like this off. Maybe it's a gimmick. Maybe it's something to make people go, oh wow, I can't believe they did that,
here's
but
like,
it's working on me.
Something can be a gimmick and be incredibly well done and purposeful to the story. Within certain circles, this was a cinematic event. You know, you had to go see this in theaters. The same way that like Brutalist VistaVision was like a cinematic event for a certain group of people. So yes.
Or Avengers Endgame.
Sure. But
this was truly the Avengers Endgame of Chinese slow cinema.
Yes, of course.
Do you know the story of what they did on New Year's Eve? That's crazy.
How it got like $39 million through pre-sales and
people
things
were
on one night without them realizing what the movie really was. Massive respect for him to, like, I don't know if he'd be able to make Resurrection if it wasn't for this kind of...
No, absolutely not.
Okay, let's move on to Saeed Roustaee, which was my second pick here. This is a filmmaker that I think we know pretty well at this point, but I think a lot of people, especially in North America or in the Anglosphere, might not know as well, other than his film The Law of Tehran. Not many people have seen his films because they simply haven't been picked up or distributed all that much, and critics haven't been like
they haven't championed him the way that I feel they should.
Yeah, he is the youngest filmmaker in the competition slate this year at 35 years old.
By 2 months.
By 2 months, just slightly younger than Bi Gan. He is a filmmaker that right now has 3 films under his belt. His first film was back in 2016, where he was already working with some pretty big name actors, Life and a Day. That film had an under the radar festival presence, but had some decent success. You know, I always kind of saw Roustaee as, for the most part, adhering to the norms of the Iranian government in order to scoot by censors. Women are always veiled in his films. For the most part, there aren't like egregious actions in his films. So I was surprised to see that he was imprisoned, especially for Layla's Brothers.
I definitely don't think Layla's Brothers is more provocative than Life in a Day and Law of Tehran. I mean, Layla's Brothers is a film primarily about a family and their dynamics, whereas Life in a Day, Law of Tehran as well, both of those first 2 films are direct criticisms of the harshness that the Iranian government takes to drug use.
You know what it might be? In Law in Tehran and Life in a Day, ultimately the drug dealer character is taken care of.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Whereas in Layla's Brothers, there's a pretty dark ending.
I suppose you could say that he's adhering to the codes of conduct, and through a certain lens, you know, you could watch it and say, oh, well, they got what they deserved in the end.
He joins that club
He
of
absolutely does.
Iranian filmmakers who have been thrown in prison. Asghar Farhadi is not in that club. What I'll say about Iranian contemporary auteur cinema is that you can oversimplify them and put them into 2 boxes. Filmmaking that really tries to observe and play with fiction and non-fiction. You know, filmmakers like Mohsen Makhmalbaf, Abbas Kiarostami, and to a certain extent Jafar Panahi.
At least half of his film.
And the second box would be filmmakers that seem to have merged from the classical tradition of Iranian literature and playwriting, which to me would be filmmakers like Mohammad Rasulov, Asghar Farhadi, and Saeed Roustaee. And the reason I say this not only is because the form of the film doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel, but also because his dialogues, like, There's not a single filmmaker that I'm aware of that has as much back-to-back dialogue as you're watching a film. Like, it is hard to read all these subtitles.
Yeah, he is basically the Iranian Aaron Sorkin in how fast that dialogue moves. It is rapid fire. You will miss subtitles. Some of the subtitles are on screen for a second and a half, maybe. Everyone is shouting over top of each other at all times. It never feels egregious, and it feels like that he's using the yelling of these characters in all of these films as a way to show how familiar they are with each other, as a way to immediately get the audience to understand these people have history, there are bonds that we see, and the yelling almost makes us feel like we're part of the family. I mean, I hope your family doesn't act like this, but mine definitely doesn't.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that I don't know any families in my immediate vicinity, at least, who act like this, but there's something so tangible about their relationship, and it feels realistic, it feels truthful.
The issue that we see with these characters is that they're all good people and they all love each other very much. However, they also have years of history where they know how to get under each other's skin.
And so that's the case for Layla's brothers and for Life in a Day. I'll also say that I think a key aspect of better understanding Saeed Roustaee's work is understanding how he treats money and currency. All the actions of the characters in his films are very much influenced by how they can just get by. You know, these are families for the most part who are not very well off and who need money to support their entire family, which usually are a burden in some sense, but also in the way that they interact with each other, whether it's under the family roof or just with characters here and there. Every line of dialogue is transactionary. It's either delivering some kind of emotional information or intellectual information.
Yeah, all these characters have very selfish drives, have very selfish wants. And so when they're talking to other people, they're usually saying, I need you to do this for me. I need this from you. But currency and exchanges, that's always a part of his films. And I think that really characterizes his dialogue in a way that we don't see as much in most films. He's very unique and distinct, almost more like a playwright than anything.
Oh, for
you know,
sure,
I see as much Anton Chekhov in him as I see any filmmaker.
And yet, his films don't necessarily feel like they would easily be adaptable to a play because they are so specific to the geography, whether that is the micro geography, you know, the locations of the households they are in, or even, you know, that location where all the drug addicts are in La Tehran with the cylinders, which is a massive set piece. Everything feels geographically specific, and those kind of environments and settings really add to connecting all that's being said to the real world and to real world issues.
One of these movies, one of these days, is going to be his Western breakout, because I feel like this is a filmmaker who is so accessible, is so easy to watch, is so entertaining.
But I think he didn't break out in part because he isn't accessible. I mean, his films should be accessible, but I think the dialogue is the inaccessibility.
But at the same time,
because there's so much.
There is so much dialogue, but I think that's what makes me feel like he is this very accessible filmmaker. His movies move fast.
I think
the
distributors
pacing,
and like buyers watch the film and they're like, I can't keep up. Do you think Iranians watch Aaron Sorkin?
I don't know what Iranians watch. But to the point here, like, it's odd to take these films that are about quite dramatic subject matter, quite heavy things, and it's entertaining, it's fun, it's almost like, in a way, especially Life in a Day, at times it feels a little bit like watching a really trashy reality TV show.
Well, let's talk about Life in a Day. Life in a Day is an ensemble drama. It's about a family of many sons and daughters, a family that is still living under the same roof, but you know, each children kind of has their own kind of corner of the house where they live in. The central conflict revolves around the central daughter of the family, Samaya, who is supposedly going to be wed off to an Afghan man and have to move to Afghanistan. So this kind of puts pressure on every other member of the family to get their shit together a little bit. And then you have members of the family, Mohsen, played by Navid Mohammed-Zadeh, who really doesn't want her to leave, so he's trying to kind of gather as much money as he can.
And he's broken out of rehab to stop her from leaving.
The way he does does this is essentially by selling drugs, which is not good in Iran.
Which is where the title comes from, of Life and a Day, because if he's caught selling drugs, he will be sentenced to life and a day, meaning that he will never be able to be pardoned, because his sentence would end after his death. But there's so many characters that have different conflicts, and of course you mentioned the central conflict, but there's also the other brother, Morteza, who is a shop owner. He's a businessman, and he's the put-together one in the family. He's a recovering drug addict who has a lot of contempt for what his brother is going through. And that is a fascinating dynamic to watch as well, because Morteza has been where Mohsen is right now. And then we've also got some of the other sisters, like Layla, who is an agoraphobic shut-in who stays in her room. We just hear her name thrown around for most of the movie, and she never shows up until very late when someone enters her room to find something, and they're like, oh my God, why do you have 6 cats in here with broken legs? And she's like, I do this now. Yeah. Can you blame me for making money? And it's just ridiculous because there's all these characters and the way they intersect, there's so much history to them. We don't need to see them the whole time to understand their place in this family. There's also Navid, the youngest son, who is an academic genius who is also struggling a little bit because his family is such a chaotic fucking mess. So there's all of these undercurrents that are going on. And not even to mention the mother, who is a hoarder, who can't let go of anything, who has bread that's been expired and moldy for 6 months in her fridge. There's not one character that's normal in this entire movie. Probably Samaya is the closest one to being a normal, well-adjusted person, and yet she's dealing with the chaos of everything else.
Even then, there's a scene in this society, you're not just getting married to the person, you're getting married to the family. And so Samaya, she is a well put together person. Like you said, she's beautiful. She's still relatively young. She's young enough to be able to get married, but nobody will ever go with her because she has this completely like bonkers, not put together family.
Kind of like an American sitcom family in a way. But there's one scene at the end that really shows the contrast between these families where, you know, the entire movie we've been hit with wall-to-wall screaming at each other. And then after she's in a car with her new family and they're going away, and it's the first time in the movie that people shut the fuck up. And you really see the contrast between these families, that not only is she leaving to a new culture, a new place, but she also, for the first time, is kind of realizing, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can be with these people because they're boring. They're not interesting. The end of the film is really that first moment where we're able to breathe and not hear that sound. But it's almost disturbing to not hear it after so much time where we've been surrounded by it.
Exactly. I think the last few scenes, that scene specifically, but also even when she comes back, there's such quieter suddenly, and there's less subtitles. Yes, this is a family drama. And these things can get, you know, repetitive real fast. What makes me more interested in these not only is the energy, the intensity. I'm thinking of the scene where Mohsen gets arrested, but also just the way it's all related to a certain examination of Iranian society and the Iranian household, you know? So there's something that feels above the telenovela, you know?
Absolutely. There's something that elevates this far beyond what you would just see on TV. It is distinctly cinematic. This is a story that I don't think could be told in any other medium. It is cinema, for sure. Navid Mohammadzada, one of my favorite performances that I've seen recently, actually. I was absolutely floored by his portrayal of Mohsen in this, because he's just so desperate. I think desperation is what I would characterize that performance as.
Recurring actors in Roustaee's films, in every film that I've seen Mohammadzadeh in, he's always playing something very different, and he always like transforms into his role. So he's really, really good at portraying this role in particular. So I do agree with that. I think the ensemble overall, though, is exceptional here in this.
Pretty exceptional.
اون خونه است. بغل این فروشی از رو دیوار میرم میام.
همه آجریه؟
بله.
مرسی عمو جان.
Well, that is the end of this episode. We hope you enjoy our discussion. We'll be talking about these two filmmakers' new films in tomorrow's episode on the Croisette at Cannes, so stay tuned.